Michelle Godlewski, your emotional support American abroad, and I've moved abroad 3 times in the last 12 years. This is How to Move Abroad for people who don't need more inspiration, they need an actual decision and a checklist. Each week, I cut through the internet noise and walk you through the stuff that actually decides whether this happens or not. Every episode ends with a weekly task because collecting information isn't progress, and someday isn't a strategy. Let's get into it. Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the How to Move Abroad podcast. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. There is a moment in the process of moving abroad that literally almost no one talks about. It does not happen right at the beginning when you're all excited and fueled by possibility and dreaming about cobblestone streets and cappuccinos and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't happen at the end either when the flights are booked and the adrenaline takes over and you're like, I got this, I'm done. It literally happens in the middle. And I refer to that as the very messy middle part because it is usually after you've done all the responsible things that you feel completely lost. You figured out which visa link makes sense. You stopped pretending you could just wing it. You wrapped your head around proof of funds without completely losing your mind. You accepted that paperwork and appointments are real and slow and annoying, and you're just going to have to trudge through it. And then there's this pause, this little piece in the middle where you're like, cool, I got this shit together. I'm all good, except there's a quiet moment where your brain finally asks the question it's been circling the whole time. And it boils down to, can I afford this? It's not like you're being dramatic or you're yelling or you're even like, oh my gosh, it's this small, tight, very private thing that sort of pops up. And it usually happens sometime in the middle of the night when you're tired and you're laying in bed and you're like going through all the things that you need to do. And all of a sudden it pops up when your phone is face down and you're staring at the ceiling, just trying to fall asleep. And this is honestly the point at which most people peace out of the process. Not because they ran the numbers and the numbers said no, but because they did not run the numbers and their imagination totally filled in the blanks with fear. So today we're not doing money like a finance podcast. We're doing money like people who actually want to follow through. Visas are very technical. Paperwork feels bureaucratic. Appointments honestly feel annoying. Money feels personal because money carries history. Money carries how you grew up, who stressed about it, who never talked about it, who thought about it, who had it, who didn't. Money carries shame for a lot of people, especially women, especially moms, and especially people who have always been responsible. So when you try to talk about money and moving abroad in the same sentence, your nervous system goes, absolutely fucking not. We are not doing this. And the internet does not help you at all here because the internet has basically 2 extremes. Either it tells you this is cheap and easy and you'll figure it out once you get there, or it tells you that it's impossible unless you're rich and reckless and secretly have a trust fund that you're not telling anybody about. Honestly, neither one of those 2 are true, and neither of those help you plan. What helps is knowing your own numbers well enough that your brain can stop catastrophizing literally everything. I'll put it to you this way. When we moved abroad in 2013, we owned a house that was upside down and we were going through a short sale process and we were living in an apartment paycheck to paycheck, praying that we could make it to Sunday sometimes, or until Friday, I should say, and get our second paycheck. And it was just like, oh my God, are we going to do this? How in the hell are we going to afford to move abroad? Now, we were moving abroad, as you guys who've been around for a while know, we even had a relocation contract, but that doesn't cover every single thing about moving abroad. And I was like, oh my God, yes, our tickets are paid for and our visa is paid for. Great. But what about once we get there? The cost of living in Switzerland is no fucking joke. Like, it is so expensive. You think New York City is expensive. Try living in Switzerland where it's like $7 for one piece of chicken. Like, it's bananas expensive, right? And we know that going in because little old me starts doing all my research, trying to figure this out. And holy shit, how are we ever going to afford this? And I honestly remember sitting on the bed with my husband. And we found out in September we were moving and we were moving in December. And I looked at my husband, I think it was like late November. It must have been right around Thanksgiving. And I told my husband, we can't do this. And my husband was like, what do you mean? I'm like, we can't do this. We cannot do this. And he goes, why? And he was like, because we don't have the money. Quite frankly, we were upside down on our mortgage. The short sale hadn't gone through yet. So holy shit, what are we going to do with that? We had credit card debt. well, let's rephrase that. I had credit card debt because of a variety of different reasons coming out of college and coming out of university. I had my car broke down a couple years before. Like every shit show scenario you possibly think of, I probably had lived it at some point in my life. We had just finished a cancer battle where we were paying thousands upon thousands of dollars in copays to be able for me to survive this whole situation, right? And now I'm going to spend how much money to move abroad? You've got to be fucking kidding me. Like, this is not possible. And my husband was like, we'll figure it out. Like, that's not something you just figure out, honey. I'm like, we don't have any money. What are you talking about? And in the end, honestly, we did figure it out. And again, if you've been around for a while, you know, we ended up taking out or borrowing money from a family member in order to pay our down payment on our apartment. And there was a few other things where a few odds and ends along the way where money got really tight for a very short period of time. In fact, the first, let's say 6 weeks that we lived in Switzerland, we didn't get a paycheck until the end of the first full month that we were there. So we moved in December, but we didn't get a paycheck until the end of January. So we lived almost 6 weeks off of savings and we're like, holy shit, this is so tight. We had pasta like 3 nights a week for dinner. We didn't eat out. We had salad the other two of the nights of dinner. Like we were so cost avoidant altogether. I was traveling for work. So like I would try and eat while I was traveling for work and then like save where we could at home. My husband had a cafeteria at work, so he was able to get cheaper food at work. But ultimately we were like, how are we going to survive here? And after the first 6 weeks and our first paycheck came, we realized that we were a little bit better off than we expected. But our first like 6 weeks, honestly, were frighteningly tight because we didn't recognize or didn't plan appropriately for our move. And that's part of the reason why I want to bring this up to you guys now, because it's so easy for you to be like I was and say, we can't do this. It's absolutely impossible. But the reality is, it is possible. You just have to run your numbers. Don't be like me and not run your numbers because then you end up in this, I don't know, ramen for 25 cents a day situation that nobody wants to be in. So it is possible. And once you own your numbers and know what you're not, once you know your numbers and own them, you can make anything happen. People often tell themselves a lie accidentally. And that lie is, if this were possible, I would already know how to do it. And that is absolutely not true. If it were that simple, you would already know. If it were that obvious, you would already know. Possible and simple are not the same thing. Most people who actually move abroad do not do it because they felt confident. Hello, me. They do it because at some point they replaced fear with information. And money, honestly, is the biggest information gap you're going to come across. Every single time I've moved abroad, there has been a moment when everything suddenly settled down. It didn't get easier, but it felt more settled. And it was never because we had more money, honestly. It was because we stopped lumping everything together into one terrifyingly huge mental pile. When people say they can't afford it, what it usually means is, I don't know which part of this is going to be the problem. So let me tell you what is actually happening in your head. You're probably mixing up leaving costs, landing costs, and living costs into one big blob that's called too much. That's what I was doing. Leaving cost us some money. Landing there cost us some money. Staying there, living there cost us some money. Right after Thanksgiving, when I was sitting on the bed in tears, I was putting all of those monies into one big pot and thinking it was all going to be due tomorrow. And that could be what you're doing. Of course, that would make everything feel impossible. Of course, your brain can't parse through such a blob, right? It's not meant to do that. So every move has chapters, whether you name them or not. And you'll hear me talk about this when I talk about budgeting. The first chapter that you have is leaving. That's your before budget, as I like to call it. This is the loud and somewhat feeling expensive chapter. This is the paperwork and fees, shipping, pets, selling your stuff. All that kind of stuff is overlap costs. That's your actual like leaving chapter. It's annoying. It can feel super expensive and it ends. The second chapter is when you land. This is probably the most awkward and hard to guess chapter. You're not settled yet, but you are not unstable forever. You're in that weird in between where deposits and setup costs hit all at once. This chapter is uncomfortable, but it's temporary. And then there's the third chapter, which is your living chapter. This is your quiet chapter. This is your actual life. Things like rent and groceries, transit, healthcare, normal Tuesday stuff. Most people panic because they think all 3 chapters are happening at once and that they're happening all forever. They are not. And once you start to separate them, the move stops feeling like a cliff and starts feeling like a sequence. And you start to know when you need what money along the way. People tend to sabotage themselves without meaning to and end up shooting themselves in the foot because they plan as if everything will go perfectly. Income starts immediately. It doesn't. It usually takes about 6 weeks to come in. Costs are magically the best that they could be. Nothing unexpected happens. That's one fantasy world or sabotage world that people live in. The other one is the exact opposite. They plan that everything will go wrong. They prepare for literally every disaster that they can think of, and they refuse to move until they feel completely safe. Both of these are fantasies. Real planning lies somewhere in the uncomfortable middle where you know about 80%, maybe, if you're lucky. The place where you can say, okay, if this is harder than expected, we're still fine. That's where you are right now. This is not pessimism. It's competence, honestly. It's easy to say everything's going to go wrong. That's pessimism. But the reality or the realism of the whole situation is some shit's going to go wrong. Some, not all. Some shit is going to happen and you're going to be like, oh, I got to roll with these punches, Batman. And you do. You figure it out. Timeline is your biggest money tool. And this is the part where people really don't want to hear. And I know why. Because it seems like if I have a longer timeline, it means I failed. It doesn't mean that, of course. A longer timeline means that it took a little longer to get there. It doesn't mean you're weak or that you don't want it badly enough or you're bad at budgeting. It's just life happening. Sometimes it means you're choosing to do this without blowing up your whole life at once. Time lets you spread out exit costs. Time lets you stabilize your income, for example. It lets you build a buffer if that's appropriate, or it lets you make trade-offs without resentment. Fast feels brave. Stable is what can actually get you there and keep you there as you go. So we talked about this, I think, on the first episode of this new How to Move Abroad piece, but I just want to make sure that we reiterate it here. We did the visa lane first. We talked about it. And if you're just jumping in this week, great. But go back and listen to the first episode in what I call season 2, but in the How to Move Abroad list for this month, it started in January. Go back to that one if you haven't listened to it yet. We did visa lane before we talked about money. And we talked a lot about the visa lanes because your money plan only works if you know what your visa lane is. You have to know how much money you need from your visa. Can you work locally or not? Can you use remote income or not? Do you need a buffer or ongoing proof of funds or not? When does the income actually start for you? If your visa lane says no, your budget has to respect that. Anything else is fantasy math. So if your visa lane says that you need 3 months of rent up front because you're going for a student visa, and each month, for example, in France is 700 euros, you better damn well have 2,000 euros in your back pocket, right? And yes, that means euros and not dollars. So definitely take a look at that, what the conversion is. But those are things that you have to consider, okay? Those are things that you want to look into. And that's the reason why we defined your visa lane first, because if we were just randomly choosing any visa, you'd be saving until you're dead. Okay. That shit doesn't fly here. That's the reason we're choosing our visa lane so that you can choose the rest. Take a deep breath. I'm going to say something that you probably are resistant to hearing because I know I was at the point that you're at right now, which is you are allowed to want this even if you don't have a lot of money. Even if you have debt, and even if your first move is not your forever move. Your first move can be the move that makes the next one possible. This is not settling, it's strategy. So if you eventually want to end up in France, for example, but your first option would be you have enough money now to get a student visa in Portugal. You can get into a university there. You can get out on the money that you currently have, then maybe that's your move for now. Then maybe that's what you do. And you work towards getting into France at some point in your future, right? You're already in Europe. It's easier. You're connected. They'll pay to fly you to France instead of paying to fly you from the US for an interview, for example. So many options open up. if you stop focusing on one specific country and start focusing on a visa opportunity that gets you abroad with what you have right now. Here's what actually happens when people finally look at their numbers. They do not collapse under the weight of the number. They actually get to exhale, because even if the numbers are not what they hoped for, the uncertainty piece disappears. The weight of not knowing disappears. And that is what drains you. That unknown factor is what feels so heavy. So knowing what you need to solve next is lighter than pretending like nothing exists. What I want you to do today is to realize you are not going to predict the future perfectly. You are trying to build a plan that survives whatever your reality is. That means ranges instead of precise, exact 75-cent numbers. It means buffers instead of bravado. It means choosing trade-offs intentionally instead of resenting them later. It means deciding consciously what matters most in this season right now. So for this week, your weekly task is going to be a little bit different. We're not necessarily writing down numbers today because I don't want you to get stuck in the numbers for right this exact second. What I want you to do is open a document, not a spreadsheet, but open a document. Write down 3 lines for me. What it costs for us to leave, what it costs for us to land, and what it costs for us to live monthly. You're going to put in ranges. Guess if you need to, messy is fine. You can estimate. So, for example, if you're moving an entire 2-bedroom apartment across an ocean, and that's going to cost you around, say, 15 grand. Your flights, depending on if you fly, let's say you're flying economy and you're flying JFK to Paris, I don't know, that's about $500 on an off season, right? So like figure it out like that. It doesn't have to be super precise. It's just a general range of how much you estimate things to be. Once you land, you're probably going to need 1 to 3 months of rent. You're going to need a few things like that. And then for the cost of living per month, you can use a cost of living calculator online, totally reasonable. Get an estimate of how much that is, just so you see it spread out on what it looks like. Then after you have those ranges, the very basic, you're not doing math here. You're just getting like numbers on paper so you can think about it. I want you to write one sentence underneath those numbers. And that is, you can choose from 2. One is, the thing that makes this feel possible is blank, and fill in the blank. So if you feel like this is possible for you, I love positive affirmations. I'm someone who I can tell myself things are going to be okay and I can make sure that they're okay. I am someone who needs positivity, so I write positive affirmations. So the thing that makes this feel possible is something positive. Why do you think you can do this? Or if you're someone who is a little bit more like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do, answer this one instead. The thing we need to solve next is what? Fill in the blank. The thing that we need to solve next is blank. Both of those are positive. Both of those are forward thinking. Both of those give you the possibility of a future abroad, but they acknowledge where you are right now. And that's what's really important. That's all I want you to do this week, because once the problem is named, it stops becoming a monster. Once you see even the most wildly estimated numbers because you looked it up and you figured it out online, it takes the ridiculous number that you see somebody say that you need $20,000 upfront before you can even consider moving abroad. It can take that and bring that down to a reasonable level. It is not a monster hiding under your bed. I promise you, we can make this work and figure this out. Next week, we're going to stick around with money, but we're going to get a little bit more specific. We're going to talk about where people overspend, where people cheap out and regret it, and how to make trade-offs without turning this into a constant fight with your partner or yourself. For now, do the thing, get your numbers, approximately ask yourself either the thing that makes it feel possible or the thing that you need to solve next. And that's it. Close the book. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest with yourself. I appreciate you being here. If this episode was helpful, please review it. Listen to me. Please review it and let me know. I really, really appreciate it. Share this with a friend or a family member who's thinking about moving abroad. I feel like so many people live in the world of this is not possible. And I want to show you how it could happen for you. So If you have questions, hit me up on Instagram. I'm always around to answer. This week, if you want, I'll drop in the show notes free money hacks. So the 10 best favorite things that I can think of for your move abroad. That's free. You can download it. Just click the link below and you'll be taken directly there. Otherwise, I look forward to chatting with you again next week where we'll continue on the money discussion, but be a little bit more specific and make sure that you are ready to go. All right, my friend, that's it for this episode. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in to Abroadly Speaking. If today's episode got you dreaming a little bigger or thinking a little braver, go ahead and hit subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who's ready for their own adventure. And hey, don't be a stranger. Come hang out with me over on Instagram at @IamEstelle for the real, unfiltered life abroad. Keep that passport handy, and remember, life's too short to stay in one place.